They came for my shoreline on a sunny Saturday, like it was just another light chore for them, a ribbon of yellow string, a couple of shiny metal stakes, and a woman in a blue blazer pointing like she owned the horizon. I told her she was wrong, and she smiled, that kind of smile that already had an answer written, then said, "This is community property now." And the whole backyard quieted like somebody had flipped a switch. That's how it starts, small, casual, the kind of thing people pretend is boring until it isn't. My name's Jonah Brooks, and Willow Lake has been my family's for generations. The dock, the old oak, the axle half buried near the high water mark, all of it belonged to my father before me. Marla Finch, HOA president, prim and practiced, walked down with a clipboard, two men carrying a coil of string, and told the neighbors the water had moved the line. She used words like project and safety, and, honestly, some people nodded because they wanted to believe someone was organizing things for the good of the neighborhood. That's how power drapes itself in respectable cloth. First, it was small things that didn't sit right. Nail heads in the trail where I'd never seen them before, bleach on the dock boards like someone had tried to speed up what rot, a drone hovering its quiet judgment over a weekend cookout. Then Evan, the surveyor Sam Ortega, came over, because Sam doesn't take "are you sure's," he takes measurements. "They planted this," he said, and you could hear the certainty like a stone hitting a tin roof. Once you label something fraud, you change the game. We started documenting photos, timestamps, a log I typed into my phone like I'd start a boring diary, and it would somehow save me later. The neighbor who'd always been quiet, Ruth, who bakes for the community garage sales, dropped off an old plat from 1946 she'd dug out of her attic, and suddenly the paper trail was not on our side of the ledger. That's when Marla's smile got harder. She started showing up with pamphlets and people from the board, and the narrative she wanted was simple. Boundaries are messy, progress is messy, trust the HOA. But trust is different from truth. You learn the faces of intimidation, the look of someone who thinks paperwork is a battlefield and rules are weapons. There was a sound one night, a footstep pattern that wasn't the wind, and I called Riley, my friend who used to be in the service, because this was getting louder than a neighborly spat. We set up cheap infrared cameras, like the ones hunters use, and a thermal monocular that makes soft shapes look like ghosts in infrared. It was anticlimactic and cinematic at the same time. The lake slept, and then the feed showed a figure moving like a shadow, a coil of yellow string, a hammer glint, and there, the exact motion used to tie off a crooked line. Riley and I watched through breath we held, and when the man Tommy Hale, a handyman who'd been paid by the HOA, reached to drive the stake, we turned the light on. We called the deputy. Officer Grant came with calm steps and paperwork that smelled like bureaucracy and consequence. Tommy's tools were logged, his GPS coordinates recorded, every little thing cataloged like a museum of a stupid crime. That's when paper became a weapon for us. Emails leaked from a disgruntled member of the board with lines that read, "Plant the pin and make it official," and an invoice for materials labeled "Boundary Project Emergency." Marla's office had paperwork that matched Tommy's receipts. Suddenly, it wasn't an isolated handyman doing a favor. It was a plan with sign-off and funds. At the HOA meeting, I projected the photos, the IR clip, the emails one after another like a slow, unwinding spool, and watched a room of people change color. Marla tried to steer the meeting back to community harmony, but the evidence didn't buy her a single second. When the community saw the side-by-side photos, the new shiny rebar against the old granite post that Grandpa had said, it felt like watching someone being caught in a lie that was previously dressed as authority. The board tried to shift blame, saying it was miscommunication, but miscommunication usually doesn't come with an invoice or a nighttime operation. There were search warrants, a small seizure of devices, and a council vote that put the HOA's funds on hold pending investigation. Ugly and necessary. The judge's summary was plain-spoken. Photographs, witness testimony, and a legal survey all agreed the stake was false and the action was improper. We won a civil judgment that tethered the line back to the original pins and ordered restitution. But the thing about small-town dramas is that they don't end cleanly. Marla was removed from the board, and then predictably some folks said we'd gone too far, that a community leader had been humiliated. Others cheered, called us defenders of property. The window between right and wrong is often filled with neighbors who have to decide which side they want to stand on. I sat on my dock the day they set the granite marker in concrete, a brass plaque with coordinates and a surveyor's license number, and it felt like putting a bookmark back in a story someone else was trying to rewrite. But the victory smelled of cold cement and paperwork and the awkward relief you only get when a fight ends because the other side decided to play by different rules. There's a softness to the aftermath, too. People came by, some to apologize, some to hand over old family recipes, some to give beers and say they'd been ashamed for not looking closer. Ruth baked a pie and left it on my porch with a note that said, "For the dock." Sam the surveyor stayed longer than he needed, sitting in a lawn chair watching the water. He said, "Jonah, it's not about the line, it's about who we are when we draw it." That struck me because it was true. Boundaries are less about dirt and more about respect. Even now, months later, there's a hum under the neighborhood, whispered conversations, a board election coming up, murmurs of legal appeals. Marla filed for a review, and some people think she's got a case. Maybe she does. Maybe laws are messy and judges see nuance in ways a backyard crowd doesn't. I don't know the end of it, and I can admit that I learned that admitting uncertainty is a kind of honesty too. What I do know is this: when someone tries to steal a piece of your home with a smile and a spreadsheet, you document it, you gather witnesses, and you make the story visible. You don't retaliate with the same slyness. You respond with facts, with people who will stand with you, and with patience to let truth do the work. If there's a moral I've been living through, it's that community is fragile but reparable, not by sweeping things under rug, but by pulling them into the light. It's also that power wears collars and can be humbled, but humbling someone doesn't repair the harm unless you also build something sturdier than resentment. And the next time someone shows up with a clipboard and a smile, I'll still listen, but I'll also take a picture. So tell me, what would you do if a person in a position of small power tried to reshape your neighborhood overnight? Is holding them accountable always the right move? Or can community repair look different? Drop your thoughts below. Argue with me. Push back. I want to hear the things that make you uncomfortable, the parts you'd handle another way, because this is exactly the kind of story that gets better when other people bring in their truth. If you've got a similar tale, put it in the comments. I read them all. And if you think this matters, share it with someone who believes property and people both deserve better.